Hi, today we're going to be reviewing some basic decimal concepts to make sure that everybody has a good handle on decimals. And in order to do that, I want you to think for a moment about the cube that I have in this first picture. How many flats would it take to make that cube? If you said 10, that would be correct. Okay, let's take a look at the second picture, and now we have a flat. So how many cubes would it take to cover that entire flat? If you're thinking 100, that would be correct. And last picture at the bottom there, we have a rod, or a long, as some people call it. How many cubes would it take to fill that rod or that long? If you said 10, that would also be correct. Now, you're probably wondering, why are we talking about the base 10 blocks if we're talking about decimals? Well, they are related. That's the reason. But before we move on any further, I want to talk about vocabulary today. And I just want to refresh your memory on the word fraction. Fraction means part of a whole. So anytime we have a fraction of something, it's going to be part of the whole of something. For example, I could have 1/2 of an apple, which would be part of a whole apple. Or I could have 1/5 of a box of crayons, which means I only have part of that box of crayons. And the same goes for maybe I had 3/4 of a pie, which means I had almost a whole pie, but not quite. So sometimes we refer to fraction as the one. So the whole, is what we refer to as the one. So instead of saying the whole of something, you might be doing some work in class, and they might give you an object and say that it is the one, meaning that would be the whole that you would have to use in those particular problems. Okay, so if we have some pictures like these using base 10 blocks, I want you to write a fraction for this first example. So we have 3 rods, or 3 longs, if you want to call them those. What fraction would that be? This would be 3/10, because we have 3 out of 10. Whole would be the 10, okay? Let's take a look at the next one. In this example, we have 5 longs or rods, so it would be 5/10, because the value of that long is a 10. That's why it's the denominator. And since I only have 5 of them, that's why that's the numerator. Okay, let's take a look at the bottom. Now, I have 13 cubes. Now, I know 13 is going to be my top number or my numerator, but what is going to be my bottom number? It would be 100. Okay, because it takes 100 of those cubes to make a whole. So we've got 13 of those cubes out of 100. Okay, let's take a look at some other examples. We have 2 single cubes and we have 4 flats. Now in this example, what would my fraction be? Each of those flats would be worth what? 10, because if we're thinking of the big giant cube as the whole, the 100, then this fraction is going to be 42 hundredths. Okay, because we don't have a full big cube there. We just have 42 of those pieces. Okay, what if I have 2 flats, 3 longs, and 4 cubes? In this instance, we would have 2 and 34 hundredths. Okay, the next one, we've got 1 flat and 6 cubes. So our mixed number would end up being 1 and 6 hundredths. Okay? Because this is our whole here in this problem. This was our whole. Actually, we have 2 wholes for that problem. That's why we have a whole number and a fraction, which is called a mixed number. Okay? All right, now we have some fractions. And I want you to tell me how we would make those using base 10 blocks. So if we have the fraction 2/10, 10 is my denominator. So that means I would need 2 longs to equal 2/10. Okay, what if I have 35 over 100? I could do 3 longs, which is going to give me 30. And then I could do 5 cubes, which is going to give me that 5. So 10, 20, 30 with my longs plus 5 is 35 over 100. Okay? Now, this next one we have 3/10. So what I want you to start thinking about now is not only do I need you to think about what would the base 10 blocks be, but how would I write that as a decimal? So 3/10 with base 10 blocks, I would have 3 rods, or 3 longs is going to equal 3/10. Or I'm going to write it in decimal form like this: 0 and 3/10. Okay? Looks like I did 3/10 twice. I didn't mean to do that. Let's just change this to 4/10. Alright, so if I had 4/10 without using base 10 blocks this time, how would we write that in decimal form? Now remember, we don't have a whole number. All we have is a fraction. So 0 is going to go in the whole number spot. I'm going to write my decimal point. And now I need to look at my fraction, 4/10. Since it's tenths, my first decimal place is the 10th spot. So that means the 4 would go here. Now, if I had said 4 hundredths, then my decimal would look different. I would still have a 0 for my whole number because there isn't one. I would still place my decimal point, but it's 4 hundredths. So I would not write my 4 in that first spot because that's the tenths place. The hundredths place is that second spot. So the 4 would go here, which would mean that I'm going to put a 0 right here. So my first decimal is 0 and 4 tenths. My second decimal is 0 and 4 hundredths. So you can see the difference in placement there. Okay, so let's take a look at my 27 hundredths as a fraction. How do I write that as a decimal? I'm going to put 0 as my whole number because there isn't one. And it says 27 hundredths. So basically I just write 27 there because the way I would say that decimal is 0 and 27 hundredths. Okay, the next one I have a whole number and a fraction. So I want you to think about that for a minute. There's a whole number there, the 2, and then I have a fraction, 8 tenths. So instead of putting 0 in that whole number spot, now I'm going to put a 2 decimal point 8 because that 8 is in the tenths place. So now I have 2 and 8 tenths. Okay, so in this lesson, we reviewed how to write decimals and fractions by converting base 10 blocks. So we took base 10 blocks, we made some fractions, we took fractions, we switched them to base 10 blocks, and then we took fractions and we turned them into decimals. So we need to be able to do all 3 of those things when you get to class. So make sure if there's any part of that that you're having trouble with, write down any questions that you have and bring them with you. Thank you for watching.